Really scary.
Okay, our next speaker is Morgan Griffiths from WESA. He's going to be talking about urban stewardship, the case of Nelson Mandela Bay Metro.
So nice to start a talk where you're not having to wait an hour for counsellors to arrive or school kids where they're waiting for whatever you're holding in your hand to bite you. And hopefully this talk is not going to want any of you to come and get involved in some of the stuff that I have biting my hands. Hopefully it's not going to be so painful. I'm going to lead you through a journey that colleagues of mine, and I say colleagues because I'm working so closely now with people like Abigail Kameneth and December Kuduka in the Nelson Mandela Bay municipality that we really are one workforce at the moment. It's not just partner organizations. And I describe it as a marriage of different organizations working together. And I'll describe some of the marriage problems that we have and some of the joys that we've had through the program. We're very fortunate that Nelson Mandela Bay, or some of you might know it as Port Elizabeth, is a city of a confluence of 5 biomes: forest, thicket, grassland, succulent karoo, and also we've got wetlands sneaking in there as well. So this incredible mosaic of vegetation types coming together. We're right at the bottom of the Mapundula and Pondoland Albany hotspot, so we just managed to scrape in on the funding scene there. But like any major metropolitan area, we've got a lot of transformational and other impact pressures on it. Particularly transformation in terms of RDP growth, settlements, infrastructure, lots of mining, grazing, waste management is a huge problem in our city, and lots of poaching, whether it's animals or plants. We get lots of aloes in our area, so there's a lot of aloe poaching with the aloe vera industry. So as an attempt to kind of deal with some of these pressures in a systematic way, WESA, the municipality, and the Nelson Mandela Bay University a number of years ago, in 2004 in fact, we developed an open space system. I'm not going to go into all the technical stuff with it. I think many people are familiar with MOS systems. But interesting about our one, it's got a very strong social focus. And yes, it's based on systematic conservation planning and conservation targets, but the municipality is not interested in conservation. Some of their staff are, but the municipality is not. We've got about 1 million people needing RDP homes and such like. The focus is on improving basic quality of life. And if we can't speak into that language and direct it, nothing actually happens. And it's one of our biggest challenges in this program. So really, the MOS has got to deliver on economic benefits, on tourism, also through ecosystem services, particularly with a focus on flood attenuation and recreational areas. Because most of the open space areas have got a recreational function. Some of them legal, in a few cases illegal. So, 2004 we developed this plan, a lot of stakeholder commitment. In 2007 we revised it away from that very conservation focus, came in particular with trying to join the networks up. Climate change is going to be quite a big impact for us, and 2007 we saw the impact of those coastal storms, so we revised the whole plan up there. And through that plan we also developed very specific action plans to actually try and deal with each one of these areas. So not this amorphous plan that we're going to protect biodiversity. But that plan very quickly pointed out the limitations that we focus. 70% of our critical biodiversity areas are within private hands, some of it being actively used, some of it just dormant land, and hence a huge need to promote stewardship as a vehicle, because the municipality recognized they've got, at that stage, they had 2 people trying to do any real biodiversity conservation value. Yes, they've got a large conservation staff in terms of public open space, park management, but very few people actively trying to protect biodiversity in any formalized structure. And of those staffs that they've got, very low capacity in it. Essentially, there were 2 staff members who really had an ecological biodiversity background. And through their recognition of that limitation, they recognize that we really have got to draw civil society in. Not as a loose partnership, but as people working together on the ground every day, sharing the same office. And that's not just based at the funding type level or big partners like Eastern Cape Parks Board or NGOs like WESA, but really with the community groups. And I'll explore a little bit later with you how we really try to involve the community in a meaningful way without trying to create dependencies. It all started in 2007 when, under CAPE and TMF funding, we started piloting stewardship. And there are two senses of stewardship here. One is the biodiversity stewardship that we're very familiar with, we've been talking about a lot of the days. But the other one is stewardship of people living around areas actively getting involved with management of municipal nature reserves. Getting the neighbours inside helping. So the first of those in this kind of stewardship, one is the Barklands Valley Recovery Project, which became a program. First of all, trying to get this community involved, because basically the community had got out for the very reason that there were more muggers in there than there were endemic species. And crime is probably my biggest problem that I'm trying to deal with. Contact, violent crime, people on people, what are the social crimes into it. The need to create partnerships at all levels, within municipalities, between different community groups, even living alongside each other. And the basis for trying to get a lot of that going through public education and public utilization of the valley. The second one is a pretty straightforward stewardship type program with private landowners, which was started out by the name of the Van Staden's Corridor Stewardship Initiative. And there we were looking as a pilot thing to get non-contractual stewardship agreements. This was really trying to get into this whole sense of, as a municipality, what is the stewardship, and let's start trying it. So at least we were trying back in those days. There was a little bit of a hiatus, but particularly in these projects we picked up a number of shortfalls. The critical lack of institutionalization and capacity within the municipality was our most limiting factor. A couple of their staff members really wanted to make it work, but the rest of them were not interested. This was just another huge burden on their time, on resources that are almost non-existent to them. The other part that was not good was that the NGOs were seen to be leading this whole process. So it was a municipality that would need to sign stewardship agreements, and they would need to provide the extension services, but they were not being seen as the leadership behind this program. WESA was. And that's wrong if you really want to create a long-term sustainable program in an urban type situation. And unfortunately at that time, the municipal and the national frameworks for stewardship, the legal frameworks, weren't there. But things started changing. The fact that we had a MOS, and at least one MOS coordinator staff member, was a big advantage over most municipalities at that time. Lots of strong relationships. Matthew Morgan Wilderness Foundation was getting involved, the Cape Parks Board, SAMBI, Cape TMF, and a lot of partnerships on the ground, local companies, local people, so it was really starting to build nicely together. And then thankfully NEMBA and NEMPOWER came about and provided the legal mandate for the municipality to invest any of their resources into it. That was a critical thing, because in fact a lot of the work they originally were doing was illegal because they were spending resources that they weren't mandated to. Thankfully, we were recipients out of this MPA program. At the moment, what we've got under this urban conservation program is a formal partnership of WESA, the municipality and crew, working alongside each other, not a case of seconded staff, but really working together. And this is our overall objective. It really is to capacitate civil society to work with the municipality, right, in the development of this urban strip. So it's really, that's the long-term goal, is to get them up to a standard in which they can be running without being babysat in any way. Again, to expand the conservation estate, critical biodiversity areas, through getting involved the private landowners, and there had been willingness of landowners in the past, and again, building the practice of recovering the Barklands Valley, again as a community resource through community-style stewardship there. To introduce the Barklands Valley, this is my office, so to speak. It's 23 kilometers long, it's 2,000 hectares, and as you can see, it's entirely surrounded by urban infrastructure and housing development, commerce, farming, and such like. And while we've mostly been hearing about rural pressures on stewardship projects, any kind of urban pressure or problem that you know of, that's what gives me my headaches every day. But the critical thing has been building a community of all these people living apart to become stewards, to become actively involved in this valley, to give back. The most important thing was getting rid of the crime. In 2007, the conservation staff who worked in the valley refused to carry on working in there because they were getting mugged every day. That's how bad it was. Nobody, not even the police, would go into the valley because it was too dangerous. Okay? And this valley is listed as one of our prime tourism avenues in the valley. So the first thing we had to do was raise money just to get 5 rangers, Barkens Valley Rangers, and then to start making the partnerships with the police and with the private security companies. And I'm very proud to say that we've had a 30% decrease in household and breakings and hijackings alongside the valley. So that's developing the social capital that we need to convince the politicians to invest into the Barkens Valley. Without showing social and political relevance, we've got no hope of sustainability at all in this particular project. Many parts of the valley at the moment you can't go into without the private security companies getting electronic triggers that you're entering the valley. And it's changing commuter traffic, pedestrian traffic across the valley, because Tutsis now know that you can't go areas because why? An ADT or Chubb vehicle always just seems to turn up when you walk in or walk out of the valley. Domestics walking across the valley, particularly female domestics, are starting to use specific entry roads because they know if they come out of that spot, there's going to be an Atlas or an ADT vehicle coming along and investigating them. And that's security. And we've changed the whole value of it. Of course, I could get back to P and read, there's been a mugging and that sets you back a couple of months, but that's where we're going forward on that. The other one is promoting use. Nobody would go into the valley. So it was a huge effort to start convincing people that it was now safe enough to go in. So it's been everything from community walks to biodiversity explorations, big things like carols concerts, big sporting events. We've just had 600 mountain bikers tearing up the valley a couple of weeks ago, urban runs and such like. So the usage has just skyrocketed as a consequence of the safety. Mobilizing volunteers has been a critical thing. Picture of some of the volunteers, scout groups, wood trekker groups, local community people getting involved and starting to help rebuild the infrastructure, alien clearing, reporting on poaching and things, and just general biodiversity management in here. Critical thing was getting buy-in across municipality silos, so that when you get sewage bills into the valley, because unfortunately all the municipal sewage lines run through the valley, so every time there's a rain, I get sewage in the valley. But it was building the partnerships with infrastructure and engineering so that they would actually be bothered and willing to come out and start dealing with these issues. So we still get the spills, but they still get there the next day and try and fix it up, as opposed to 3 months later if you're lucky. Lots of environmental education, and it's been a real benefit getting the security right, that now schools themselves are no longer just coming in because we've invited them in, but they're organising their own events. So that confidence in the area has gone. Mobilising funds through the improvement of security, and that's paid for things like the Barkens Valley Rangers. A lot of big corporates have come in on board. Coca-Cola has invested nearly R1 million now into the Barkens Valley Ranger program, just as a sign of confidence on what's happening on the ground. Okay. Lots of job creation going on, lots of skills development, particularly getting the black community that was living just a little adjacent to the valley, but never really involved. And it's been a huge achievement getting them involved in it. Moving on then to the more classic type of stewardship thing. In 2007, we got 8 non-contractual stewardship agreements going, but then that process fell a little bit by the wayside, simply because the municipality didn't have the resources into the extension services, but we also wanted to try and get a rates rebate at a municipal level going. So that divested our attention away, and once we got the legal stuff around that, we were started back to investing into this particular program. Typical type of contractual type of agreements, so I'm not going to go into this process, I think you're all familiar with it, but just to highlight things where at a municipal level now, we've got a rates rebate at the short-term biodiversity agreement and a rates exemption at the longer term side. So that's been a great thing to achieve, particularly the efforts through a finance-stressed municipality to kind of get that rebate has been excellent, and the buy-in from their lawyers has been fantastic. We just don't take anybody who wants to get involved. We really are trying to meet those 28 biodiversity areas, so we've developed a scoring system, a ranking system. We're applying that because everybody in the back parts, particularly if they've got kind of nature reserve areas, wants the rebate. We just can't service all those areas. So we've really had to be selective about who we can afford to get in, and they've got to score into this high category. So Lady Slipper is one of the projects that we're looking at, scored at 29, and so they're into the focus area. Okay. Typical type of process, I think most of you are kind of familiar with the stewardship process, the lengths you've got to go to, so I'm not going to go into it. But quite important at this level, right up in the front here, we've got a review panel. So it's not just the municipality trying to make these decisions. We really are working with the Eastern Cape Parks Board and Tourism Agency and SANBI and the university and the Provincial Department of Environmental Affairs to be part of this review panel. So it's not just ticking the municipality's conservation boxes, it's very much connecting into the provincial and hence into the national program. Critical issue because in some cases we've been working on properties. One is the Yellowwoods property, that's right, Yellowwoods, where they've got so excited about the program that while we were hoping to add 4,000 hectares to our little scorecard, they've now jumped up to the next level, and that's been done through the Eastern Cape Parks, but we will be doing this. Eastern Cape Parks Board and the municipality will be providing the extension services. So how are we doing? Institutionalization is still a big problem. We've experienced major setback in the last couple of months. We've lost 2 of our 4 staff members, so we've got to get over that hurdle again. We've worked out that the Municipal Finance Act might actually prevent long-term biodiversity agreements. So we're having to go back to the lawyers and try and get around that particular one. So if any of you are working at that level, understand that the lease agreements may not, I think, go about 15 years or 10 years. So we're working around that project. Landowner engagement has been very difficult. I sympathize entirely with Griffiths. This land nationalization thing is really struggling with us. We do have 8 properties in the pipeline at the moment. We're working on them. Most are favouring conservation agreements. They are very nervous about why the municipality wants to take their land. And what's really been a good part of it is how Crew have been a very active component of this project. And they are definitely part of the long-term plan, helping with assessments of the land and long-term monitoring on it. So, just some final lessons. This marriage of WESA, Crew, and the municipality, we've had our good times, we've had our bad times, our arguments and discussion, but we're learning to work alongside each other, our different types of organizational styles, and it's really paying dividends on this side. What has really been important for us is getting social development experts on board. We as conservationists, we might not understand, and I think Griffiths' thing was, we might not understand the farmers, the landowners, the communities. Get a social expert. They have the ability and the techniques to engage a lot better with communities. We kind of stumble in there trying to find our way. They've already worked out all the systems and they're advising us. And I'd really like to thank Teresa Bull, who some of you might know in that regard. Talk of nationalisation in the mines, it's impacting so much on the landowners. At this point, we still got a lot of capacity training to do, particularly with Crew and community members. We want to lift that game. And finally, institutionalization. That's the route we've got to go to. So thank you very much. And looking forward to keeping those partnerships going and establishing more on that score. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Morgan. I think we might have time for one question if anybody has a burning question they'd like to ask. Thanks, Morgan.
Just point to this button. Okay, yeah, they push that one there.
I'll just give everybody a moment to come in or out.